friends of the New York State Military Museum. And we'd like to welcome you all this afternoon to this performance. We would ask you please to try and remain as silent as you can during the performance because our performers will not be wearing any microphones. See? Please try and be as silent as you can during the performance because our performers will not be wearing any microphones. And please, and our performance will start in 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Ladies and gentlemen, this is a rare occasion. We have 2 first-person interpreters of the War of 1812 in one spot. What you are about to witness is not just a play, but a research-based historical interpretation of what these men felt and how they reacted to information received at the time. Scene 1 is President Madison in Washington City, what we know today as Washington, D.C., in December of 1814, while hearing of the Northern Federalist proceedings at the Hartford Convention at the Old State House in Connecticut. Scene 2 takes place in mid-November 1814. It is a working session between 2 of the 5 American negotiators in Ghent and what they did with the news of the victory at Plattsburgh. Scene 3 returns to Washington City with President Madison after the Treaty of Ghent arrives at his doorstep. Sit back and enjoy this unique combination of entertainment and education. A question and answer period will follow the conclusion of the performance. And now, the New York State Military Museum is proud to present From Plattsburgh to the Peace.
Well, there it is, Capitol. What's left of it? 10 years to construct, a few moments to destroy. That, along with all the public buildings, except the post office, destroyed by fire on August the 24th, 1814. I remember the day so clearly. Hazy, hot, humid, tensions running high and frantic awareness heavy in the hearts of our people and the air. The British approach, the pandemonium was at a fever pitch as everyone was fleeing the city pell-mell. We were off to the races all right, but it wouldn't be the horses that were running. I began my day at dawn with a meeting of our commanders at the Navy Yard, while Mrs. Madison waited at the President's mansion, and ended my day not knowing if she was safe. At the British approach, she had to evacuate. I had already ridden onto the battlefield, you see, in Bladensburg, about 8 miles north of the city. And the generals there put up a good showing in the beginning, we were superior in numbers, we were superior in ordnance, but apparently the men were not superior in their ability to fight. I believe that they may have been triggered to retreat. The only question was which road to take. The road towards Georgetown or the road towards Washington City itself. I went to the front lines with my entourage, but as soon as one of those newfangled Congreve rockets exploded above our heads with a red glare, General Winder expressed his desire that perhaps we should retire back behind the lines, which we did. And I immediately knew that I had to get word to Mrs. Madison that she needed to evacuate the President's mansion as soon as possible. I would like you to know that Mrs. Madison waited till the moment of her peril to ensure that His Excellency General George Washington's painting was safely evacuated. An act of courage that I hope our country will be ever grateful for. I take responsibility for losing our federal city. I believe that some of my decisions and my appointments did not allow this war to be prosecuted with precision. Upwards of 3,000 miles of boundaries was simply an overwhelming quantity of territory for our paltry forces to protect. Perhaps a retrospective could reveal for you a trail of reason that led to my decision on June the 1st, 1812, to request from Congress a declaration of war, which Congress complied with on June the 18th of the same. The crying enormity of impressment upon our sailors on the high seas that began way back in 1807, 7 years ago, with the boarding of our Chesapeake by the HMS Leopard in our own coastal waters, which precipitated then President Jefferson to declare that those waters were then off limits. The question of territory. The British were not maintaining their commitment to evacuating the forts in our western parts. They continued to court the natives to keep that territory in a state of unease for our citizens. It was deemed part of the duty of the Treaty of Paris of 1783, why 29 years of that effrontery could no longer be tolerated. I said to Ambassador William Pinckney 4 years ago that it's impossible not to see that the avowed object is no longer to retaliate on an enemy, but to prevent legitimate commerce. Back in 1805, I had taken Mrs. Madison to Philadelphia. You see, her knee has given her trouble much of her life. And I wanted her to see the renowned Dr. Physic there, because it had ulcerated and she needed quite acute care. And I stayed with her for the entire time, writing my longest work to date, to prove Great Britain's rule of 1756 illegal according to international law. It was for naught. Great Britain continued to ignore its consequences. So President Jefferson and I implemented a trade embargo in 1807. It failed, as Mr. Gallatin said it would, but still, we wanted to pursue measures of peaceful coercion as a civilized alternative to bloodshed. So we modified it in 1809 to stipulate that the trade limitations would only be imposed on the principals in the affair, Great Britain and France. But some of our northern states became mercenary and decided that perhaps they wanted to consider secession from our union of these great American states, meeting in a convention as we speak in Hartford, Connecticut. And the newspapers are full of rumors of something that would be abysmal if it were to come true. There was simply a panoply of issues that we could no longer tolerate. We were backward stepping into a corner slowly that left us no alternative but to bare our teeth. Sometimes one must take a stand, even if we are not wholly prepared. You can understand that this is not an easy topic for the President of the United States to talk about. It has been a stain on my reputation, but at the same time, we have negotiations going on in Ghent in order to bring a cessation to these hostilities. Now, when the Russians offered to mediate between us and Great Britain last year, I seized the opportunity. I sent Mr. Gallatin, foreign-born himself in Geneva, and accustomed to the trickeries of European diplomacy, to join with Mr. John Quincy Adams, our most experienced diplomatist, already stationed in St. Petersburg, to treat with Tsar Alexander I to endeavor to bring an end to this war. We could not make an impression with this effort, so the war was forced to rage on until a most glorious victory happened on September the 11th of this year, when I heard the reports of the strategic naval and land victories at Plattsburgh, New York, under the masterful guidance of Commandant McDonough and General McComb. I knew that it would embolden our negotiating stance in Ghent to be a most persuasive bargaining chip in bringing this war to an early and resourceful conclusion.
Mr. Gallatin, like New England fishermen will never give up their fishing rights in Canada.
But, sir, neither will Mr. Clay allow the British free navigation up and down the Mississippi, nor should they be allowed to do so. The fish, however, I think will be happier.
Sir, my father fought hard for the assurance in Paris in 1783 that the New England fishermen would have the right, sir, to fish and to dry their catch on unoccupied, uninhabited Canadian lands. I will not let his efforts go undone.
My dear sir, I would not have it so if it were possible. However, it would be difficult to convince the rest of the nation that New England's desire should be accommodated when their only interest appears to be self-interest. The question would be asked, why should we give up peace when the northern states have not had to fight this war? I, sir, cannot answer that question.
Mr. Gallatin, as usual, you go straight to the heart of the matter. Much as it pains me to admit it, but what do we do?
We remember, my dear sir, the essentials. That when things looked most bleak, it was the courage of our people that showed most strongly. Oh, indeed, not as we have heard about the federal city and the disastrous military decisions that led to the burning of the Capitol and the President's home. Those were moments of shame. And yet there were brighter moments yet to come. Even as we first met with the English commissioners in August of this year of 1814, even then, unknown to us, events were beginning to come together. These events would make it clear to England that she could not, no sir, could not win this war. Even after the burning of the federal city, the dispersal of the soldiers and the Marines gathered to defend it, the flight of the chief magistrate, all seemed to be in complete disaster and disorder. A mere 40 miles away, English would bomb for a day and night Baltimore Harbor and failed to reduce Fort McHenry. English soldiers would land at 2 places on either side of that city and be repulsed. Oh, indeed, sir, that was not the best of it. No, sir, we find ourselves here able to use a most glorious victory won by both our Army and our Navy to strengthen our negotiations.
Yes, indeed, sir. I remember when the news arrived of the taking of Plattsburgh by the British Canadian Army. It came following 2 weeks of horrifying reports and newspaper articles about the burning of Washington.
Chinese.
It came with other news of the capture of Machias, Maine, together with the failure of our attempt to retake Michilimackinac in Upper Michigan. Shortly thereafter, the British sent us the 5th note, demanding that the treaty was going to be on the basis of ote possidetis, which means, as you know, keep what you gain by force. Then, still referring to my diary, October 21st was the day that we heard of the news of their attempt to take Baltimore.
Yes, sir. Those were gloomy days for us.
Well, October 25th was a very important day for me because it was the day of Jubilee of my esteemed parents' 50th wedding anniversary. I wrote to my mother, and I also wrote to the Secretary of State, James Monroe. I told him, considering the situation with Great Britain, I felt there was no hope for peace.
Also, Mr. Adams, when do you think we began to gain the upper hand in our negotiations?
Well, sir, October 28th, a mere 3 days later, Mr. Salters brought us news of the American naval victory on Lake Champlain and the capture of the entire British fleet and the subsequent retreat of Sir George Prevost and his army back to Canada. This was exactly the type of news that we were hoping for. It strengthened our position with the British. I think it was the turning point in the negotiations for us. Yet, I hear there is one more throw of the die by the English. While we had heard that their campaign to our southern coast may have been stalled by the loss of their General Ross in Maryland, the London Times reported that Sir Edward Pakenham, the Duke of Wellington's brother-in-law, was on his way to Halifax, Nova Scotia.
He was there to support General Provost.
We thought maybe he was going to support General Prevost in Canada. However, the more believable rumors here was that he was going to go join the forces that are already in Canada and lead them to our southern coast. Those forces in Canada were the cream of Wellington's soldiers from the Spanish Peninsula.
All the more reason then, sir, for us to strain every nerve, convincing these commissioners from England they have nothing to gain and everything to lose by continuing this war. That status quo ante bellum is the intelligent path to take. In addition, you and I both know that matters are going poorly for England on the European continent, for them and their allies. There's talk in the ministry of withdrawing Wellington from his post in Paris due to unrest in that city. They're looking at having him rearm the troops, to muster them, possibly bring them back into battle. Against whom? Napoleon? That eagle will fly again, I warn you. Now matters hurry along in this late November.
Yes, I hear that Lord Castlereagh, their foreign minister, is on his way to consult with allies in Europe. I think the result of that meeting will be that he will have Admiral Gambier and his British Commission meet with us sooner than they think. And I think Lord Castlereagh will have instructions for him that they will not like.
So then, sir, let us gather our other three commissioners together, be fully prepared to make our argument that the status quo ante bellum is the most sensible approach to take, and take our fullest advantage of our victories in Baltimore, and especially that of Plattsburgh.
Yes, sir.
Well, here it is, the Treaty of Ghent. Just arrived, and here, ready to be opened. It's just arrived from the Senate and has received their approbation, and only needs the stroke of my quill, and it will be official. If you could indulge me a moment, if you would. There. It is done. The Treaty of Ghent will soon prove that the United States of America have a place on the world stage. It will serve as a testament to our belief that freedom is so sacred that men will always be ready to fight for their freedoms. That the government, under our Constitution, will stand by its principles and protect the rights of her people, and that even lesser powers can defeat mightier ones when truth is on her side. Although it may be frigid outside, my heart warms to the satisfaction that you may go home tonight with the confidence that the Treaty of Ghent will give you peace on your way home tonight. Let this be, as Mr. Adams said, the last treaty of peace between our countries. May the overarching hand of Providence make it so. Well, I believe we have reason to celebrate. I believe Mrs. Madison's next Wednesday evening drawing room should have some extra punch. I mean that figuratively and literally. It will be here at the Octagon House, and I hereby invite all of you to attend. May the strength of our peace give you strength as you guide yourselves home tonight. Adieu and huzzah. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes our brief play. We've had such an overwhelming response today that I am absolutely thrilled to see. I thank you so much for coming. We will conduct a question and answer period at this point. Mr. Pugliafico, who portrays Mr. John Quincy Adams, and I will attempt to remain in character. as we answer your questions. There is a couple of things circulating around. Mary Ann is going to bring 2 clipboards of paper that request your assistance on a matter, if you are so inclined. It's completely voluntary. And you're free to leave at any time that you wish. I am so thrilled to see that we have some young people with us today, and I encourage some questions from them, because the things that we're talking about aren't necessarily that easy to comprehend, yes? So Mr. Schmilke is welcome to stay up with us if he wishes, but we're going to pull up a couple of chairs and entertain your questions. There's more information. If you have not received the playbill, put your name on a piece of paper that's circulating around that Mary Ann can give you, and I'll get you all the information that you could possibly want. Again, we thank you. And Mr. Pugliofico has an announcement.
I just want to say that I've been researching the War of 1812 for a while. I got into this costume, started researching John Quincy Adams, and I wrote a book about it, At the Treaty of Ghent. I have this book, I only have a few copies. They're $5 each. My wife will be selling them at the table in the back. And enjoy.
I want lots of questions. Yes, madam.
I believe either you or your father had a quote that I've been trying to track down that I find quite illuminating. The gist of it is, my grandfather was a soldier, so I could be a farmer, so my son could be a teacher, and my grandson could be an artist. Or could you perhaps help me get the right quote?
That is for certain my father's quote. And he said those words. I cannot say it any better than you did, because I don't know the exact words, but it was my father, John Adams, 2nd President of the United States.
Okay, thanks.
And perhaps what we'll do is, because I know it's difficult to hear in here, is we shall repeat the question so that everyone understands what it is that is trying to be said. Yes, young lady?
How long did it take to rebuild the White House after it got burned down?
Her question was, how long did it take to rebuild the White House after it got burned down? Can I ask you a question as a result of that? How do you know it was called the White House? Well, in fact, there are reports, you see. I'm going to be talking sometimes in character, sometimes without character. There is a letter written by Dolly Madison's sister, who refers to the President's Mansion, the Executive Mansion, the President's Palace, all referred the same way as the White House. Some accounts tend to say that that was really only during Monroe's administration, the 5th President, who is the Secretary of State under Mr. Madison, and also the Secretary of War, because Mr. Armstrong was quite incompetent, you see. And he resigned on August the 29th, immediately replaced by Mr. Monroe, who served a dual purpose. And so, how long did it take to reoccupy the White House? Well, it wasn't until Mr. Monroe was in his term, his first term, in September. So the inaugurations back then took place on March the 4th. And this being February 17th, 1815, when the Treaty of Ghent is signed in the Octagon House by President Madison,